Welcome back, friends. You are listening to the Juicebox Podcast.
Hello, I'm Steve. I'm in central Pennsylvania. I am 55 years old. Been a type 1 diabetic for 41 years.
If this is your first time listening to the Juicebox Podcast and you'd like to hear more, download Apple Podcasts or Spotify, really any audio app at all. Look for the Juicebox Podcast and follow or subscribe. We put out new content every day that you'll enjoy. Want to learn more about your diabetes management? Go to juiceboxpodcast.com up in the menu and look for Bold Beginnings, the Diabetes Pro Tip series, and much more. This podcast is full of collections and series of information that will help you to live better with insulin. Nothing you hear on the Juicebox Podcast should be considered advice, medical or otherwise. Always consult a physician before making any changes to your healthcare plan or becoming bold with insulin. This episode of the Juicebox Podcast is sponsored by Omnipod 5. Omnipod 5 is a tube-free automated insulin delivery system that's been shown to significantly improve A1C and time in range for people with type 1 diabetes when they've switched from daily injections. Learn more and get started today at omnipod.com/juicebox. At my link, you can get a free starter kit right now. Terms and conditions apply. Eligibility may vary. Full terms and conditions can be found at omnipod.com/juicebox. The episode you're listening to is sponsored by US Med. usmed.com/juicebox or call 888-721-1514. You can get your diabetes testing supplies the same way we do from US Med. I'm having an on-body vibe alert. This episode of the Juicebox Podcast is sponsored by Eversense 365, the only 1-year wear CGM. That's one insertion and one CGM a year. One CGM, 1 year. Not every 10 or 14 days. EversenseCGM.com/juicebox.
Hello, I'm Steve. I'm in central Pennsylvania. I'm a COO and VP of Sustainability for a startup here in central PA. I am 55 years old. Been a type 1 diabetic for 41 years. So
wow, 41 years. How old were you? Were you like in your teens, like 14 when you were diagnosed?
My 14th birthday present.
Literally on your birthday?
I had the cake, and the next day felt terrible. Was drinking a lot. Of course, the typical story you hear: drinking a lot, peeing a lot. Lucky for me, my older brother had type 1.
Oh,
and so he immediately was like, I think you're type 1. And so went to the endo and was diagnosed. So for him, he's about, what is he? About 9 years older than me, 8 years older than me. He was diagnosed when he was 11, but essentially they didn't catch it. He was in a coma for 3 days and survived. So yeah, that was my 14th birthday. And so it was obviously not a great birthday present. So
yeah, geez, I'm sorry. Your brother's okay afterwards?
Yeah, he's still alive and kicking and doing well. And I'm trying to think now. He's probably had type 1 for 50 some years. So yeah.
How long had he had type 1 before you did?
Trying to think. 11. I would say probably 11, 12 years.
Okay, so he'd had it for a decade or more by the time you were diagnosed.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, I believe so.
And your parents saw it coming maybe a little better the second time?
Yeah. I mean, he saw it immediately, and then my mom's like, "Oh, yeah, this is a problem."
Yeah.
And then went to the endo. So for me, luckily, at least they knew the routine, had an endo already because my brother John had already, gone through this routine. So
yeah. Okay. All right. So your diagnosis, do you remember much of it at all, or is it a thing that's kind of lost in your memory?
It's pretty lost. I mean, I remember doing the injection in an orange and that kind of stuff, and the NPH and regular and routine and that kind of stuff. I think if I remember correctly, we started out we both were kind of doing the peace stick, and then we just got a blood glucose meter like right around when I was diagnosed, and it was like looked like a brick. It would take, I don't know, a couple minutes for it to actually read your blood sugar. So yeah, it was kind of the front end of it when it comes to technology. So
yeah. Okay. Did you find it difficult to grow up with?
I did at the time because I've got 3 older brothers. So the next oldest, who is not a type 1, playing football, baseball, other things, and at that time, without CGM and without pump, it was, most kids, you're type 1, you're not playing sports.
Mm-hmm.
So that was somewhat of a disappointment. But outside of that, I think I did a pretty good job of just, making it through did a lot of hunting, fishing, that kind of stuff, outdoor stuff.
Yeah.
Instead of the typical sport route. For the most part, I kept it under my, I didn't really talk much about it with other people except for close friends. And then it was a little easier to keep it somewhat under the radar because you didn't have a pump and those types of things beeping and, make alerting people to it. So
was it important for you that people didn't know? And I mean, is that something that you learned from your brother by any chance?
No, I think it was from a standpoint to keep it quiet was in my head, just from the standpoint of I didn't want people to think less of me or think that I couldn't do things because I was type 1. So I kind of, that wasn't the first thing that came up. Now, once I got to know somebody and, had a conversation, I had no problem telling them, but it was more of a, just someone new you talk to. I'm not going to throw it out there and start talking about my type 1 and what I'm doing. So
I never know exactly how people mean it. Like, I'm super closed off. Nobody ever knew. I wouldn't tell anybody, or I just, you're not one of those people who runs up to somebody and is like, hi, it's nice to meet you. Guess what? I have diabetes. Right.
Yeah. And even, I was kind of interested. I haven't listened to the podcast. You posted, or the person who did it, a woman did a recording not long ago about living in corporate America. And I did that as type 1.
Yeah.
And I did still, I keep my pump in my sock. I don't, have it hanging off my belt. I don't try to show it off. And part of that is, I think, because I don't want the first thing we talk about to be about, what's wrong with you? What's going on? What's that thing attached to you? So I'd rather meet the person, talk about me, and then, as I get to know them, then, say, I'm type 1.
Get them to know you before you start introducing this thing that they don't have any context for.
Yeah, I don't want a pity party is mainly what it comes down to. I don't want people thinking, "Oh, poor you." So I don't know if it's not that I'm ashamed of it, and in many ways I'm proud of it, just from the standpoint of, I lived through it. I've got a BS, I've got an MBA, almost an MS, been in corporate America, and so it didn't inhibit me from doing anything I wanted to do from a career standpoint, but I just don't like it being the first thing out of the gate. So
it makes a ton of sense. I completely understand. And then later it's okay. You can you let the people in you want to let in.
Yeah, exactly.
Is it that after they know you, you feel like after they know you, they see you're a capable person, that maybe they won't jump to those same conclusions?
Yeah, I guess that might be part of it.
Not even a thing you're thinking about that closely.
No. Once I get to know you and we start talking, I might talk to you about it the first time I meet you if there's something that pops up that, like, of course, if the CGM's screaming and there's an alarm. Oh yeah, by the way, I'm type 1, but it might be a couple of weeks until I get to know the person. We're talking at work or whatever, and I might just mention to him, like, look, type 1. If you hear beeping, that's probably my pump or my CGM, and also just know if I'm incoherent, you probably need to call someone or
please help.
Yeah. Although my wife would probably, get the alert and be, texting me, "Are you okay?" So I've got a funny story about that. It was I had to fly to Italy for work and got there, and I don't know what happened. I think it was just wonky. Where I don't know if Arden has dealt with this or if you've run across it. Maybe you've heard stories of it, but the time change. The time change going from here to Italy, and then the pump, you have to reset the time.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I have I have the dawn phenomena, so I've got a lot of basal in the morning, and I think it hit me, and then I reset the time, and it just screwed up my blood sugar. So I just crashed. I was like, like 50, and I'm sitting on a train in Italy, and everything's beeping. I'm down in glucose tablets to try to get back up, and it's like 2 a.m. in the US, and my wife's like texting me, "Are you okay?" And
So you had a more aggressive settings for morning time that suddenly it wasn't morning time anymore for you.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yep.
Oh, that's interesting. Because those impacts come from your sleep rhythm.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
I never thought of that before. That's really interesting.
Yeah. So what was cool to me is like, okay, my wife's sitting in Pennsylvania and I'm in Italy, and she knows what my blood sugar is, and it's telling me I need to eat something. So
I know I'm on a train. I'm eating the seat in front of me. I don't know what to do.
Yeah. And that was about it. That was one of those real lows where you're like sweaty or you're shaking. You're like, okay, this is a bad one. I need to start, settling up and getting the sugar in me. So
yeah. Wow, it's interesting. It really is. I was going to ask, that was going to be my next question when you mentioned your wife. Like, we talked about, like, how do you tell people around you, but like, how do you decide when you're dating people? Like, is it a similar cadence about like, let them get to know you a little bit first?
yeah, I think so. I mean, it's been so long since I've dated someone. So, but yeah, I'd say that in the early days, that was part of it to to kind of somewhat keep it on the down low initially, and then bring it out and make sure they're aware of it for many reasons. One, just because they need to know, and you need to be honest with them. But two, also from a medical emergency reason.
Safety.
Back then I've had lows. So
did lows used to come more frequently before CGMs and stuff like that?
Yeah, before I got on the pump and had CGM back in the trying to think now, mid 90s, I had two significant events where one, I was unconscious. My wife had to call the ambulance, and that's a funny story because we were on a third story of a house, and they came up. My wife had already started giving me sugar, and I was eating it. And by the time they got to the house and came up, I was conscious, and I was feeling fine. I think I was up to like 60 by the time they got there. And they're like, "Well, we have to take you to the hospital." I'm like, "No, you don't. Like, I'm fine." And they're like, "No, but it was, I don't know if it was a legal issue back then or if it was just their liability side of things. But anyway, so they put me in a stretcher and took me down 3 flights of steps. And I'm like, look, I can walk down by myself.
You guys are going to drop me down the stairs.
Yeah.
Also, I think you're just taking me so you can bill me for the ride.
Well, and that was an insurance story, and that back into that one where so they did that. I get a $600 bill in the mail
for the ride.
Yeah. And so, and I had insurance, so I called the insurance, and I'm like, this should be covered. And she's like, "Oh, well, explain it." And she's like, "Oh, yeah, that should be covered." And that was my first, dealing with the insurance company. Deny first and hope you
hope you go away and pay it. But also, $200 every flight of stairs is a little steep.
Yeah. And that was like probably 96 maybe. So
I would have told the insurance company, "Listen, you do what you want. I'm not paying it." But I told him I didn't want to go. So you want to fight with him, you can go ahead and fight with him about it.
Yeah, exactly.
That's crazy.
Exactly. So
you have some notes here that are interesting. Like, you have a bunch of different allergies. Today's episode is brought to you by Omnipod. We talk a lot about ways to lower your A1C on this podcast. Did you know that the Omnipod 5 was shown to lower A1C? That's right. Omnipod 5 is a tube-free automated insulin delivery system, and it was shown to significantly improve A1C and time in range for people with type 1 diabetes when they switched from daily injections. My daughter is about to turn 21 years old, and she has been wearing an Omnipod every day since she was 4. It has been a friend to our family, and I think it could be a friend to yours. If you're ready to try Omnipod 5 for yourself or your family, use my link now to get started. Omnipod.com/juicebox. Get that free Omnipod 5 starter kit today. Terms and conditions apply. Eligibility may vary. Full terms and conditions can be found at omnipod.com/juicebox. You've probably heard me talk about US Med and how simple it is to reorder with US Med using their email system. But did you know that if you don't see the email and you're set up for this. You have to set it up. They don't just randomly call you, but I'm set up to be called if I don't respond to the email because I don't trust myself 100%. So one time I didn't respond to the email and the phone rings at the house. It's like, ring, you know how it works. And I picked it up. I was like, hello. And it was just the recording. It was like, US Med. Doesn't actually sound like that, but you know what I'm saying. It said, hey, I don't remember exactly what it says, but it's basically like, hey, your order's ready. You want us to send it? Push this button if you want us to send it. Or if you'd like to wait, I think it lets you put it off like a couple of weeks or push this button for that. That's pretty much it. I pushed the button to send it. And a few days later, box right at my door. That's it. usmed.com/juicebox or call 888-721-1514. Get your free benefits checked now and get started with US Med. Dexcom, Omnipod, Tandem, Freestyle. They've got all your favorites. Even that new iLet pump. Check them out now at usmed.com/juicebox or by calling 888-721-1514. There are links in the show notes of your podcast player and links at juiceboxpodcast.com to US Med and to all of the sponsors.
Yeah, and that was the primary reason I wanted to get on. Mainly just to kind of inform people just if they run into something similar, because it was pretty crazy for me. Fast forwarding to the late 90s, I went on I think it was the IR 1000, the Animas, the first Animas pump, on several Animas, then jumped to T-Slim and CGM. So was monitoring and doing pretty well with my blood sugar over the last probably 10, 12 years. And in 2000, I guess it was 2019, late 19, I started having situations where like I would go out to eat or even eat at home, and like my blood sugar would spike to 300, 400 like after dinner, and I could not get it down. Mm-hmm. I was dosing and dosing and dosing. Finally, I realized that the inset site was just getting overloaded. So I started actually adding shots to the, I'd use the pump and shots to try to get me back into, somewhat a range, but it was almost impossible. And it was the first time in my life where I felt like, okay, there's something wrong. Like insulin isn't controlling this. That went on for about 2 months. And then I started to have some other symptoms and I started writing them down. And so then I started Googling like, okay, high blood sugar, diabetes, these symptoms, flush. I'm trying to remember what else I typed in, and up popped celiacs. And so I was like, oh, that's interesting. So did some research and cut out gluten immediately.
Okay.
And like a week and 2 days, and boom, blood sugar's fine. I thought, well, I must have celiac. So I went to my endo, who I had really good endo at the time. He tested me for everything. I didn't have the genetic, markers for celiacs. Tested me for a million other allergies and, different issues. Couldn't find anything. And he's like, well, if cutting out gluten's working, that's good. But he said, I don't know what the issue is.
Okay.
So went gluten-free and was doing really well. And about like probably 5-6 months later, I started to have issues again. And they weren't as drastic, but still having situations where I'd eat, it would spike, it'd be bad for a couple of days and then come down.
Okay.
And then finally I figured out I made myself pesto and had gluten-free pasta. It was basil, garlic, and olive oil. And I put walnuts in it. And I knew I had eaten basil, garlic, and pasta all the time, gluten-free pasta, and had no problems. So then cut out tree nuts, and it reduced the problems further. And then I've been really good for the last, I'd say 4 or 5 years, but once in a while I'll have some issues where I'll go out to eat and something will happen, and I'll think I've gotten glutened, and then it'll be a couple days and it'll go away. And finally figured out from another experiment that it was also onion powder, which made absolutely no sense to me because I eat onions all the time and that doesn't impact it.
But the powder, like just bought at the store, shake on onion powder.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah. And it just is bizarre. But yeah, so from the standpoint of like, if I eat at home most of the time and I regulate everything I put in, my blood sugars are great. I'd probably be below the 6s A1C. right now I'm in mid sixes, and that's because once in a while, I go out to eat, I get something that doesn't agree, and then I'm for like a week, I'm fighting it, bring it back down. So
A week.
if it's gluten, it's a week. It's like I can almost time it. It's like a week and 2 days, and I'll be dosing a ton of insulin to keep it in check, and then all of a sudden I'm crashing because at that point where I go from having the gluten impact to it finally going away, then of course then I'm overloading, because I have a different basal program setting for when I get gluten, and then when I come off it, I got to make sure, of course I go back to the original program. So
yeah, that's really interesting that you have it down to such a science when it happens. This episode of the Juicebox Podcast is sponsored by Eversense 365. And just as the name says, it lasts for a full year. Imagine for a second a CGM with just one sensor placement and one warm-up period every year. Imagine a sensor that has exceptional accuracy over that year and is actually the most accurate CGM in the low range that you can get. What if I told you that this sensor had no risk of falling off or being knocked off? That may seem too good to be true, but I'm not even done telling you about it yet. The Eversense 365 has essentially no compression lows. It features incredibly gentle adhesive for its transmitter. You can take the transmitter off when you don't want to wear your CGM and put it right back on without having to waste the sensor or go through another warm-up period. The app works with iOS and Android, even Apple Watch. You can manage your diabetes instead of your CGM with the Eversense 365. Learn more and get started today at eversensecgm.com/juicebox. 1 year, one CGM.
yeah, it is. And the interesting thing about it is when I think about the fact that if I didn't have a CGM, I'd have no clue what the heck was going on.
Well, you lived without them. You know what it is to.
Yeah. So that's the thing. Like, you're doing 3-4 sticks a day, and you wouldn't see the ups and downs and where things are dropping, and where I could look at the clarity and like watch it, and look at what the data says and say, okay, I ate at this restaurant on Sunday night, it spiked to 300, and then I'm fighting it for the next week and couple days.
Uh-huh.
The other thing that I haven't figured out yet, and I think this is the case, is it's almost like it delays both the insulin and the sugar acting. And so, I'll eat 40 carbs and, put in, depending on what it is, put in, 4 units to offset, and then it'll spike, but then also it'll go low later. It's like the insulin doesn't actually hit my bloodstream till later.
But it also feels like the carbs aren't doing it as well.
Yeah. And so
everything feels like it's happening more slowly.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. It's weird.
Yeah,
it's weird.
Have you ever spoken to other people? Like, do they signal to you that that's happened to them?
No. And I'm trying to think about it. I've talked to, I guess, 2 different endos and a couple primary care people, and they've never heard of it. And essentially what I've come to is I think I'm gluten intolerant, because I actually did go through the endoscopy and, and verify whether there was damage, and they didn't find anything. And so I believe it's not celiac. I think it's a sensitivity, which a lot of people, I guess for a while, were questioning whether that was real or not. But clearly there's data that shows there's something going on with my body that's real. So,
yeah, I mean, it's not your imagination, like, especially when it's so repeatable like that, I would imagine.
Yeah.
You feel pretty confident you're seeing what you're seeing. How often does that happen to you? Like, are you able to avoid the gluten for the most part, or is this a thing that happens with some frequency?
For the most part, I can. And it's something that I've become like a fanatic about it. Like, we have 2 different toasters. We've got 2 different jars of peanut butter. different butter because my wife, of course, eats bread with gluten in it.
Mm-hmm.
I do not. And it's with gluten-free, the definition is below 25 parts per million, which is a very tiny, tiny amount of gluten.
Okay.
And so I just have decided I've had issues those first couple of years where I think I'm gluten-free. Why am I having problems? And then I start thinking about like, okay, she just put her bread in that toaster and I put my bread my gluten-free bread in the same toaster right after her. Well,
it's actually getting contaminated.
Yeah, it's getting cross-contaminated. So we just need to be cognizant of that and put together the right ways to get around it. So yeah, I'd say in the last 2 to 3 years, it happens maybe once every 4 months or so where I'll go out to a restaurant and they say it's gluten-free or whatever, and most likely it's cross-contaminated somehow. So
and from your blood sugar first.
Yeah.
That's something.
That's the teller. So,
is that exhausting, or have you set up a system that pretty much allows this to not be overwhelming in your life?
That part is exhausting from the standpoint I have not figured out yet how to adjust the pump to counter what happens, right?
Yeah.
So that week in a couple days, it's a yo-yo of like you're 300, you're 40, you're 300, you're 40, and trying to get the right insulin to carb ratio or time it the right way. Like I was pre-bolusing well before I listened to the podcast, and I still do it. But then when I do it when I'm gluten, I don't know if that might be the wrong thing to do. I don't know. That's probably what
all over the place.
Yeah.
It's like that Katy Perry song. You're right when you're wrong. You're in when you're out. You're up when you're down. You're black when you're white. You're wrong when you're right. Is that Katy Perry? Sorry, Steven,
I don't know, but that's
how it feels
with me. So yeah. So yeah, it's definitely a roller coaster of
that
blood
sucks.
glucose.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Hey, do you have kids?
Yeah.
How many kids you got?
One, Zach. He's 31.
Oh, does he have any issue? I don't know why I thought your kids would be younger, but okay.
Had him when he was young. So he's fine. He just had his daughter's 2.5 years old. So I'm kind of like holding my breath right now with that because obviously nervous about will it manifest with her. I mean, I think that the weird part with us within the family is we never, looking back both on my dad and my mom's side, we could never figure out what side it came from because no one had type 1 that we know of.
Mm-hmm.
And even on the, I listen to the podcast pretty often, and I know your typical questions are like, okay, but what about other autoimmune? And other than arthritis, I don't know of anything else on either side that
no one else has like the celiac stuff or the sensitivities.
None of that, none of it. And that's it's just bizarre. Yeah. So my assumption is my parents mixed some genes together that usually don't get mixed together and cause major problems. So.
Listen, of all this, all I hear is that when you're toasting bread, you don't have to wait. Like you have 2 toasters. There's no waiting.
Oh, so you're trying to spin the positive on it, Scott. Yeah,
I mean, honestly, like there's got to be some good that comes. Also, what a great title for a podcast episode: 2 toasters, no waiting.
There you go,
Steve. You're gonna have to say something pretty good to get me off of that.
All right. Well, I'll try to think about something to come up with that's sexier. So.
Yeah, it's wordy, so it might get me, but that's just. I feel terrible. Like when you hear people talk about their other issues, I'm not ordering them in my mind. Like this one sounds worse than this one, but eventually, like you've got diabetes, it's enough already. You know what I mean? And then you got, another thing, and now you got 2 toasters, and you're getting gluten. I mean, and then you got to live with people who don't believe that's true. I would imagine, right? Like there's enough people in your life who've been like, you're not allergic to gluten. Shut up. Like, right? Doesn't that happen too?
I have not heard anybody say that directly
to your face.
Me. Yeah. And I think usually when I tell people about it, I tell them like, look, here's what happens with my blood sugar when this happens. And it's, here's the real data. It's not me just saying, oh, my stomach kind of hurts. Right.
Right.
And I'm sure that happens to people and they're being totally honest, but I think it's a little harder to say, oh, what happens? Oh, my stomach hurts when that happens. Well,
I just, you know what I mean, man? Like, it's like one of those things, like it's bad enough sometimes you say diabetes to people and they go, oh, what'd you do to get that? And then, you know, you're not really allergic. Nobody's allergic to bread. Shut up. Like there's people who think that. Like even like, you know, I've had conversations with people. I'm like, look, you know, unmanaged thyroid could really lead to like, you know, some depressive stuff and like, you know, I don't even know how to put it. Like you can make people short tempered, stuff like that. No, that's just them not like taking responsibility for themselves. Like it's just, it sucks having so many things that open you up to that stuff. Even if you doesn't get said to your face, you know, at some point somebody's turned their back and been like, Steven thinks he can't eat bread.
Yeah.
It sucks.
Yeah.
That's all.
Well, and that is the thing with type 1, as you know, back when I was first diagnosed, there wasn't many people that had type 2. You didn't hear much about type 2, right? So back then it was like, okay, you have juvenile diabetes, you know, what they called it then, and versus type 1 today. But as you got into the 90s and early 2000s, it was like, oh, well, you're a diabetic. Oh, well, you should, you know, eat better and lose weight and you'd be fine. You'd be like, yeah,
awesome.
That's not, that's not.
That's great. So my life's not taxing enough. I got to listen to this from you now.
Thanks, doctor, whoever.
So you're a grandfather. That's crazy. Because I think it's that you sound young, Steve. That's what's throwing me off a little bit.
There are times where I pinch myself and say, oh my gosh, I can't believe I'm a grandfather. But
it's in your head. You're worried about that baby. Now, is your son worried? Or do you think it's a thing that's on you mostly?
They don't seem as worried as I am. And I think both my wife and I were both like, oh, are you going to have kids? And you know, they're like, oh, yeah, we're
why don't you just get a parrot?
Yeah. So yeah, they seem to be fine. And you know, I think the cool thing now is the fact that, like, when I think back with my A1Cs when I was, you know, first 5 to 10 years were probably in the 7s at best and probably in the 8s. Mm-hmm. But it was mainly because you're testing 3 times a day. I didn't take the glucose monitor with me because it was a big, you know, machine.
And hump it around, yeah.
Yeah. And I was taking 2 shots a day. And like, I think about that now and think this is just nuts that I survived. So I think now if she were to get it, at least there's the solutions, there's the devices, the technology to make the, because I think about like, I'm starting to see some of the wounds don't heal as quickly and my eyes aren't as good. I go every year and they say they look great. But I think about, you know, like with Arden, you know, the way you've treated it and she's treating it, she's not going to see any of the complications that I could see. So that's where I don't get as nervous about it now.
Yeah. You don't have any like diagnosed complications.
No, but I've got the typical stuff where, you know, it's just things don't heal as quickly. I get sick easier. I don't get as well as quickly. And some of that's just getting old.
Yeah, I was going to say, how old are you?
55.
Yeah,
so
I don't know. Like it could just be that. We just went on this cruise together, like a bunch of listeners.
Yeah,
right?
I saw.
It was awesome.
I saw the post. Yeah,
it was awesome. But you know, like when we were setting it up, it was, hey, you know, people would like to sit and have dinner with you, and I said, yeah, I'll sit every night and have dinner with people, and we did. Right, like 5 o'clock rolled around, and I sat down at a table with 10 people, got to know them, and ate, and you know, it was a sit down meal. It was, you know, 5 o'clock to it was about 2 hours usually. You sat there. And then, you know, the person coordinating the trip said to me, look, there's more people that want to eat with you than we have space. Would you eat twice a day? And I said, well, I'm on a GLP. Like, I'll sit with them, but I don't think I can, like, I can't eat and then just like pretend I didn't eat and eat again. Like, I can't do that. So, you know, I said, but yeah, let's do that. Right. So turned out then it was 5 o'clock, sat down, spent a couple hours talking to people, get a 15-minute break, 7:15, sit down, another hour and 45 minutes talking to people. Like, and I was like, that'll be great. Like, I can absolutely do that. But I would get up, like I got up on Monday morning, we got on the ship, right? You hustle on, you set up your table, you intake people, see everybody, blah, 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 like do all that stuff, meet out on the deck, like, you know, chat with people, everything. I was tired when it was over, but it was fair enough. It was a good day. I got up on Tuesday, I spoke for 3 hours. Then I went to lunch, sat with some people at lunch. Then I went out on the deck, sat with a family for a little bit, just chatting. Like, it wasn't crazy. Then I had a 2-hour talk, and then I went right to dinner. And then I did the second dinner. And I got back that second night and I thought, 30-year-old Scott answered the question, are you going to be okay doing this? Not 53-year-old Scott. Because in my mind, I'm like, yeah, I'm just, I could do that. Well, man, by Friday night, we were talking like privately and she's like, hey, listen, we're going to do this again next year. We're going to spread your time out a little better. And I was like, yeah. She's like, you look tired. And I was like, I'm exhausted and I'm just talking. And you know what I mean? And it still takes a lot out of you, like sitting, engaging people. You're really listening to them, accessing your memories, talking, etc. Like I felt like if there was a meter on me that said calories on it, you could have watched it drop while I was speaking. And normally you lay down, you wake up the next day and you're like, right on, let's go again. But I got zapped, I guess is the way to put it. So then in the middle of the trip when everybody had time off and they're like, we're going to go aboard, like, we're going to go here, we're going to go there and do their excursions. I got to be honest with you. I canceled my excursion, which broke my heart because I was going with people I really wanted to be with and meet and spend more time with than I was able to so far. But I slept the whole damn day instead. Like everyone's running around all over Mexico. I'm in that cabin just asleep, like trying to catch back up again. So maybe it's just you're old, man.
Well, there's the age thing. The other thing, I'm assuming you're probably pretty extroverted.
I mean, yeah, being around people doesn't make me tired. No, not at all.
Because I'm kind of
more introverted.
We do, yeah. Well, we do some testing on the business side of like, okay, what are your temperaments? And I'm kind of right in the middle. And I do know when we go to conferences, and there's just a conference we go to in San Francisco, and it's like 3 days of, it's like speed dating, but you're going talking to investors. So you do like 20-minute, gig with an investor, tell them what you're doing, what you need.
I'd be awesome at that, by the way.
It and my boss is one of the best in the world at it. But even he, at the end of 3 days, and he's a lot younger than me. Actually, he's the same age as my son. He's exhausted too. Like just kind of talking to people constantly just tends to take it out of you.
So on the last night, they moved the meal times, and this one couple didn't get the text. So I'm done with my meal. I'm going to go up to my room, pack my bag. Like it's over. Like I'm going to go pass out, wake up, get off the ship the next day. And I'm walking out of the restaurant and they're walking in, and I made eye contact. I was like, hey, what are you guys here getting dinner? And she paused and she goes, yeah, with you. And I was like, oh, no. But I was like, okay, like, let me go up to my room. I got to pack my bag up real quick. Let me get changed. Let's go meet. Like, I think there was a Starbucks on the ship. I'm like, let's go sit. Like, I can sit. Like, let's talk. Like, you guys go grab something to eat in the interim because I'm not eating again. And so we did that. And when I got down to them, the first thing I said to them was like, look, I'm running on adrenaline at this point. I was like, so I'm going to say some crazy while we're sitting here. Maybe. And maybe not. I was like, just take it all with a grain of salt. If I say something crazy, wave a flag at me or something. I was like, because I am now just like, I'm on autopilot now, like just running like purely on adrenaline. I take your point. Like it's not easy.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. Well, you're old. That's what we got to on that.
Yeah. Old and diabetic. I think the diabetes does have something to do with it.
I'm sure they both are having an impact. But what are your outcomes like now? Like, where does your A1C sit? Like, what do your excursions look like after your meals?
The last one was 6.5. I'm typically in the low to mid sixes if I keep the gluten in control.
Yeah.
I can dial probably some things in better, or probably adjust the basal a little better. I've got some wonky stuff with it in the afternoons right now. I'm trying to figure out, but it's just, you just got to keep playing with stuff and trying to nail it down.
You've said a number of times, like, I listened to the podcast, or before I listened to the podcast, like, when did you find it? What is it brought for you?
Maybe it was 2 years ago. I don't know how I ran across it. It was either Facebook or I don't know. I can't remember for sure.
Yeah.
I started listening to it, and it was kind of funny. And then hopefully you don't take this the wrong way, but when I listened to some of the early ones, it was like, wait a minute. You haven't dealt with a diabetic that's, in his 50s and some of the stuff going on. And I can't remember what the exact one was you're talking about. And then as I've listened to the later ones, you definitely have I think after you've probably talked to a lot of people who have had diabetes for a longer time, maybe better understand some of the long-term issues. But yeah, I listened to it pretty consistently when we were redoing a house that we were moving into.
Nice.
And then now, like every day, what I try to do, I try to walk 3 times a day because that also helps the blood sugar.
Sure.
Breakfast, lunch, dinner, and usually at lunch, I'll do like a half-hour walk and listen to the next podcast.
Oh, that's awesome. I mean, I know that when I started, I really just thought, if you've heard this, I'm sorry, but for other people, like when I started making the podcast, it was January 2015. And my initial idea, which was terrible, was that I was going to take my most popular blog posts and just read them into a microphone. Because I thought, like, oh, these blog posts, everybody says these are the helpful ones. Like, these are what really helps. Like, I'll just make them available in audio. That was my first thought. I did it. It was stupid. Like, I think I got 20 minutes into the first one and I thought, oh my God, I wouldn't listen to this. Why would anybody else listen to this? Like, this is just ridiculous, And then the kind of craziest thing happened before I could even reconsider what I wanted to do. I got a guest. This guy, Adam Lasher, was on American Idol and he had type 1, right?
Mm-hmm.
And his uncle's like Carlos Santana. And I somehow got him to be on the podcast. And so then I was like, oh, I talked to, I don't know how good or bad it is. Like, I've no, it's like the first time I've ever interviewed anybody in my entire life. And so like I did that and I thought, oh, there's value there. Like he said things I didn't know. But I think that if you go back from the beginning and listen through it, which I mean, at this point might take you a bit.
Yeah.
But I think what you hear is me just, like a stone, like rolling down a hill, collecting moss. And, I'm hearing things and expanding what I understand about all this. And it just happens. It happens almost, a little slowly. But hopefully if people came along for the ride, then they learned right along with me. I almost sometimes see myself as like an avatar, like for you guys. I'm learning while you're learning.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Well, and I agree. I think the big thing that what I like about listening to it is stuff. What I was hoping with what I brought up today is just some person out there that's like, people think they're crazy because they're talking about gluten. And they're like, yeah, this is happening to me, and maybe have some better ideas how to handle it or what to do with it. But it is, I think that's what I like about listening is that you hear different type 1 stories about how they're diagnosed, what their A1Cs are, how they're managing it, what's working for them, what's not working for them. And I think you ask the right questions. And and to your point, I think it's with any job, it takes you a good year or two to kind of get your feet settled and figure out exactly how best to do it. And then you start really, I think, excelling. And probably that was the same with you of when you went from the blog to the podcast and took you a while to get settled and figure out, oh, how do I really run this?
Yeah. What is all this? It took me, I'm going to tell you, like, it's 200 episodes. And when I got 200 episodes in, I thought all the information, generally speaking, people need, to take care of themselves at a base level is in these conversations somewhere.
Yeah.
And then basically I pulled them all together and I just made that pro tip series because I started thinking like it's unreasonable to ask somebody to listen to 200 episodes to cull out all the information they need. And I started becoming aware that some people are podcast listeners. They just like hearing people talk to each other. Some people are just like, no, I heard if I listen to that pro tip series, like my A1C will go in the 6s. Like they don't give a shit about the podcast. They want to hear that information. And I was like, oh, we got to start gathering that together in places. And now, I looked up the other day, I have 26 different series that are filled with different information, like in places. And like, I'm proud of that. I can't believe that it's come as far as it has. As a matter of fact, Steve, I'll tell you something. How sometimes I say something while I'm recording so that I'll actually do it.
Yeah.
All right. So here's the thing. Only you're going to know until it happens. Ready?
Okay.
All right. I'm going to start a second podcast that's just going to have the management stuff in it. And I'm going to make each season of the podcast one of the series to try to get around the limitations on the Apple podcast thing. Because right now you'd have to go find episode 1000 to hear the first episode of the pro tip series. And then the next one, they're in a line because I reposted them in order, but most of them aren't like that. They're spread out. So there'll be a second feed that will probably start with Bold Beginnings, I think. And I'll put that series up maybe twice a week, until that whole series is up. I'll call that season 1. Then I'll go to season 2, put up the pro tips. They'll go to season 3, put up a different series, and I'll just keep doing that, like moving forward. And then people can just go back to their app, go to the different season, and that's how they'll be able to get to the different series.
I think that will be helpful. Matt, just with gluten and celiac, I was trying to like dig through what you had.
I don't have enough, by the way.
Yeah, there was, I think I only found like 3 or 4 episodes, if I remember
correctly. Not a lot of people come on to talk about it.
Yeah.
I wish more people would. Hopefully they'll reach out.
So that's what I was curious whether they have similar issues as me if they do get gluten. I just, I don't know. It seems like probably they do, but I'm not sure.
Yeah.
So
it's tough because it is, it's a niche inside of a niche inside of a niche,
Yeah, exactly. There's probably like 0.001% of the people, that have all the same issues. So us lucky ones,
I'm the lucky one.
Well, I think that's a good idea. I think it'll be interesting to follow it.
Yeah, no, I just think it's going to be also for the people who really don't want to hear me talk into, they don't want an After Dark episode. Like, right? They don't care. I know you like it. I think you're smart, by the way. I think this is a pretty good podcast, whether it's about diabetes or not. And I do hear from a lot of adults who tell me that just listening keeps them, the way they keep putting it to me is it connects them to diabetes without making them focus on diabetes. And they find that their outcomes are better, but they don't feel like they're spending a lot of time thinking about it. And that listening to the conversation somehow makes that whole thing cohesive for them. And it sounds like you might be doing the same thing, actually, because you listen pretty regularly.
Yeah. I think there's just a lot of different ideas. Everybody thinks no one knows all the answers, right? And
Sure.
And I think you probably know it well, is that there are so many variables in this thing we try to control that it's almost impossible, right? To address everything. And then you start hearing different ideas about like, okay, this is how I handle stress versus this is how I handle gluten or whatever the topic is. And you get different ideas and you're like, oh yeah, I never thought about that.
Yeah.
I need to adjust my whatever, basal, bolus, carb ratio. I think that the one thing I didn't really fully understand, I knew protein, and actually, I guess I knew more about fats than protein. And like listening to that stuff, it's like, oh, okay, I didn't even think about, how to adjust for protein. I just did my carb counts, and if it wasn't really fatty, I'm good, right? Then you end up like you're high or you're low, and you're trying to figure out like why, I did the carb counts, what's going on? So
it's always something. Like, listen, the other day, Arden was like, I'm on a Tic Tac bender. I'm like, they have carbs in them, right?
Yeah.
And she's like, what? And I'm like, she's like, they're little. I think she said they're little. And I was like, I know, but there's some carb value for each one of them. Like, don't get me wrong. Like popping 3 Tic Tacs in your mouth is, I'm really not going to be a big issue one way or the other. But if you get on like on a Jag, and the next thing you know, over the next handful of hours, you've done a box of Tic Tacs. I was like, which by the way, now you remember Tic Tacs used to be 79 cents. They're like $3 now or something like that. But so if you can afford Tic Tacs and you're going crazy on them, I was like, that box could end up having a fair amount of carbs in it. And if you don't hear somebody say stuff like that, you don't always think about it.
It is kind of interesting. Because when I think about, my parents weren't, how do I put it? They weren't that involved in my treatment. They took me to the endo, said, okay, you got to take your shots. Here you go.
Yeah.
And the way my mom's Italian, so of course she's all about the food. And so the way, instead of like trying to figure out, okay, how better do I adjust your insulin or make sure your blood test is right or whatever, she would just cut sugar from everything.
Oh.
Probably saved me from a lot of complications later in life because we couldn't, you couldn't control it as well then because you didn't have the pump and didn't have the CGM, but that was her method. Is like, okay, cut sugar out of everything. You're not eating sugar. And I remember probably the early 90s, I ran into a kid who had just gotten a pump and he was like drinking a Sprite. And I'm like, what are you doing? He was type 1. And he's like, oh yeah, you could eat sugar. You just got to, dose right. And I'm like, you're crazy. Like you're going to die young. It kind of, was my thinking, and really, of course, he had probably a good endo and kind of pushed him on the pump early and
Understood carb counting,
yeah, exactly. So yeah, it was kind of interesting living across these different segments of the research going well, then the doctors catching up to it, the endos finally starting to push it, and then it gets to the patients. But that's, I mean, the endos I've had of the five I've had, like only one of them was good. The other ones were either marginal or just terrible.
Not helpful. So did you learn things like listening to this podcast? Did you like learn management stuff that you were like, I've never heard of that before?
I think by the time I started listening, a lot of it I had down. I think there's just different nuances. Like I said, with like the protein, the fats, that kind of stuff that's a little more on the edge. But I had the carb counting down. I had the basal down. My basal is pretty good. And as you know, if you get those down, at least it's the baseline. A lot
of the game. Yeah. I mean, it's my expectation because you just said you started listening maybe a couple of years ago. I'm like, I don't know how like a guy in his mid 50s, diabetes since he's 14, like at some point this has got to like intersect you somewhere. You know what I mean?
What's ironic is the one endo who was a real asshole. Like he would just, you go in and be, why aren't you doing this? Why aren't you doing that? You're going to die. It was just like, by the time I left the doctors, I just felt like, well, I might as well just go put a bullet in my head because, this guy says I'm going to die next week because I'm not doing it exactly his way, and in some ways I couldn't stand the guy. In the other ways, it did kind of push me like to start thinking about this stuff. And probably about that time was when I got on the Animus and started that. And I did I had Dexcom 2 for a while, and I'm so mad that I didn't stick with it. I tried it for a couple months, and I was just like, I hate having one thing.
You had an early CGM and you bailed on it?
Yeah. And I kick myself to this day because that was probably late 90s, early 2000s. So if I had stayed on it, I definitely would have been in much better management shape. And then from the pump side of it, I was on the pump for quite a while, and I kept harassing my brother. I'm like, look, you got to get on a pump. He's like, he's still doing the shots. And finally, I think I got the CGM, and then I was like showing him, like, look, John, this is, you got the CGM communicating with the pump. It's like, this is rocket science compared to what we were dealing with. And he finally jumped on, and I think he got a Medtronic, and
I'm glad you
from there. So.
He's still using stuff now today?
Yeah, he jumped over to the T-Slim because he was having a lot of problems with the glucose sensors.
The old Medtronic one?
Yeah. I called him the one day, and he's like, yeah, I finger sticked myself like 15 times today. And I was like, okay, I'm on the Dexcom, and I think the last time I finger sticked was like 3 months ago for calibration. But like otherwise, I very rarely have to get a blood sample.
They were so far ahead of the curve with that CGM. They got out there, and it changed so drastically when Dexcom came. So, and they were they were up behind for a while. I guess right now they're getting ready to like launch that Simplera CGM in
that's what US. The endo just told me. He's like, I'm not going to tell you what pump to use, but he's like, I really like the Medtronic. And I was like, well, I like the T-Slim. I'm good where I'm at. And it was funny because I was talking to him about, and there's, this is consistent, I think, throughout your show. So I forget what I was asking him about. I guess we were talking about GLP and some other things. And he's like, well, look, Steve, you don't need to do anything. Like you're great. And I'm like, well, I'm, in the mid 6s. I'd like to be below 6. He's like, look, anything below 7, he's like, you saw the A1Cs of most of the other people that come here, like you're like knocking it out of the park. And I'm like, well, I don't feel like I am.
I don't understand that at all. I'll tell you, like, I don't understand the idea of like, don't worry, there are people doing worse than you, so you don't have to try. Like, what? Exactly.
Yeah.
Also, God, you said something a minute ago that like really made me think about something, and then I didn't want to cut you off, so I let you go. And I'm not going to be able to remember what you said immediately, just how it made me feel. So I am always thrown off by the things I don't know. Like, I don't understand if you're not sitting here right now thinking like there's so much happening that I'm unaware of, like how to do things, different ideas, better thoughts, like that kind of stuff. Like, and then you learn something in the future. I think it was probably about the CGM, right? you said like, oh, I kick myself now because like you had that thing in your hand. Like it was there, you know what I mean? And then, okay, you made a decision, like you didn't have enough information. Maybe it wasn't where you thought it was supposed to be yet. And you lose all that time in between. I find myself thinking about that so much. Like, what could I be doing right now that I am going to regret not knowing about in the future? I don't know if that's a mental illness or what it is, but like, even that's why I think and now I'll open myself up to somebody complaining at me on Instagram or something like that. I see all the bad parts about what AI might be. Like, I really do. I promise you, I could sit and complain about it and tell you it shouldn't be under the control of rich people and blah, blah. Like, I have all the complaints everybody else has too. But when you stop and just think about it, like, imagine knowing more. That's all I'm saying. Like, and being able to integrate it quickly. Like, we all think we know everything. Like, that's it's just a human fact. Like, no people walk around doubting themselves all the time. When they do, that's almost a mental illness. You know what I mean? Like, yeah. Like you believe you know everything. Just like when you reach 16, you're like, I'm the best I've ever been. This is awesome.
Yeah.
And I just think like, can you try to imagine how your personal conversations, how your business life, how decisions about things you're doing around your house, where to hang where to hang something, where to, put up a new wall. If you're putting up a wall, like if you had all the information and it was quickly accessible to you and you could just have a question and the answer would come, how much better things would go, or at least how much more accurate they might be. And like, just imagine like back then, if you would have like, I don't know, said like, hey, I'm going to stop doing this now. And a voice would have like come to you and went, no, keep doing that.
Yeah. That's a bad idea.
Yeah. And here's why. I know you think, you know everything, but here's 4 things you don't know. And I don't think that's very specific to diabetes. It is just sort of the way my brain works. I'm always wondering, like, what is it I don't understand? You know?
And I'm the same way. Now, in that case, what exactly turned me off, I can't even remember at this point. And I think maybe part of it was, and I do get annoyed with it now. My wife was asking me something the other day, like, okay, what, I took a shower and I had to change out a sensor or something. And she's like, how do you track all this? And I'm like, well, the insets, you're, 3 days, maybe you could stretch it to 4. The sensors are 10. If I fill the T-Slim, it's 300 and I go through this a day. So that's like, 6 or 7. And she's like, do you have like a spreadsheet? I was like, no, I don't.
Yeah. But my blood sugar starts going up, and I think my set's getting old.
But that's I tend to wonder whether that was part of it, where I was just like, I just don't want another thing to have to like track and stick to me, and at some point you just mentally get exhausted of like, okay, I gotta do this. And when I traveled a lot, it was a real pain in the butt, because I worked for a sugar company, and I was traveling all over in Europe and the US, and like, it's like, okay, what do I need to pack? What do I need to take with me? And I had a couple issues where, actually this one was more recent, where I went to Canada, grabbed a bottle of Novolog, but I had grabbed the new bottle, and I had grabbed another bottle that I had taken it down to like, I don't know, like 40 units in it.
Okay.
So get to Canada, my pump's just about out, go to refill, and I'm like, oh, I don't have enough insulin to get me through the week. So I'm freaking out. I call the endo in Baltimore. He calls up to a pharmacy in Montreal and says, puts in the prescription. And this is the cool part. I heard you talking to a Canadian last week on the podcast, and you were kind of harassing them about, what insulin do they have. But on the other side of the coin, I walked down, bought a month's supply of insulin cash.
Yeah.
For like $50.
Cha-ching. Yeah.
And I was like, this shows how crappy the whole medical debacle is in the United States of America.
That it's so inexpensive. Right.
Yeah. It just shows you, like, if they can make a profit out of $50 and they're charging $300, to insurance carriers, and it's just.
Yeah. My daughter's had diabetes for a long time now, And I've been around in this space for a long time, hearing that complaint, like the same complaints, like they're very valid complaints, about how everything works. And there's people like, oh, it's going to change this time, or it's going to change that time. I remember, what was it, back in 2016 or 2020? When did they screw Bernie Sanders? I forget. But like Bernie Sanders is getting ready to run for president. He's out like stumping about like insulin prices. People are like, now it's going to change. And I'm like, no, it's not. It's not. Like it's just, it should, and I want it to. I'm with you, but it just doesn't seem to work that way. Like somebody's going to get in the way of this and put a stop to it along the way.
There was, I won't say the company so I don't get myself in trouble, but one of the insulin companies posted something on LinkedIn. This is only like 5 years ago, 6 years ago. And this woman, was like, oh, we get affordable insulin to people who need it, and da da da. And I commented, and I was like, look, I've been a type 1 for whatever, at that point, it was probably like 35 years or whatever. And this is BS, because you guys are taking advantage of people, and, you've got lobbyists in place that influence the politicians who put the laws in place that allow you to overcharge for insulin. And the post was taken down like within seconds. And I never saw anything again of that company trying to say they were taking care of people. Because I think it was right after that. I don't know if you heard about the kid was I think he was a dishwasher at like Perkins or something. Didn't make much money. Was type 1. Couldn't afford insulin.
The boy that tried to move. Insurance. He tried to move to Florida, and he passed away there.
Yeah.
The young guy. Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah. And it's like, that just makes you sick. Like, you just think about the fact that because of the way the laws are written and what the companies are allowed to do to make massive profit, you're killing people, literally.
And my point is that if you think that's just a switch somebody has to throw, like there's a tangled web around that, and around everything political, and like, I mean, all this stuff, like to your point, like there's money and power at the top of the pyramid, right? And then and it's just so convoluted, purposefully convoluted, all the way down to us, that you start thinking like, well, if I unravel this, this has to happen, that happens. You can't make all those things happen, because every time you try to push a lever one way, there's somebody else on the other side of it making money who's like, oh no, you can't do that. I make money there. Or that's what's keeping this business open. And then I bet you if one of them was willing to come on here and speak freely, they'd say, look, we got to make money too. Like, you want the medicine? Like, I bet you that would be the argument at some point. Like, you want it? We got to make it. And I got to hire. And also, you got to hire bright people. And those people want more money. And like, you could probably argue it 6 different ways from Sunday is my point. That's not my point. My point is, you're not changing the way this works.
You could say it's the D's or it's the R's or whatever, but it's all of them, and it's the lobbyists that are able to do what they do, and no one's going to change the laws because whoever's in power gets the benefits of that.
Yep.
And so,
that's why I said power and money, because the powerful people want to remain powerful, and people with money want to keep their money. Yeah. And make more of it. And there's no end to more. And if you, and listen, I agree with you, like it's excessive, etc. But if I came to your house today and I was like, Steve, hey, I'd like to give you $1,000. You'd be like, all right, that's awesome. And I go, unless you want 2,000, you wouldn't go, no, 1,000's good. No, 2 makes sense to me. And I'll be like, all right, well, would you like $200,000? Now here's the catch. If I give you $200,000, 55 people you don't know are going to lose, money. You might be like, oh, no, I don't want that, but I do need $200,000. Like it's just, everyone's got a line. And I think when that's the truth, like thinking that you're going to stop the way this all works is like saying you're going to stop people from wanting money or power. And I think the whole world's run off of money and power. So
it is.
Yeah,
it is.
I just think I think you're saying if only those people who were powerful and rich would stop wanting to be powerful and rich. But I also think if I made you powerful and rich, you'd be like, I want to be powerful and rich. I want to stay like this. So I don't know how to and there are some people who don't feel that way. I saw an article the other day about some woman, old lady in her 90s. I wish I knew any of her details, but I guess her husband was a billionaire and he's gone. And she left like his money to some medical school, and now people who need it, like perpetually forever and ever, will go to this school for free because of that. And I was like, man, that's awesome. But you notice she didn't do it until she was 90.
yeah, which is kind of funny, because that's where you start thinking about, if I had $1 billion, like there's no way you could even spend it within the remaining year.
I do really believe that. I think there's I'm going to sound like a hippie for a second here, but like I do think there's a cap on how much money makes a difference to you.
Yeah.
You need to be able to pay your bills. I think most people would agree. If I could pay my bills, have enough of a cushion where I wasn't worried, maybe I could go on a vacation once in a while. Maybe my car doesn't have a big hole in the floor. My people around me are safe. We're eating quality food that we can afford. I don't need more than that stuff. I want a safe place to live, like that kind of stuff. Like, I'm not saying, like, I don't think people are like, no, I want to go out and buy a Lamborghini tomorrow, and then next week when I get tired of it, go buy a different color Lamborghini. I don't think most people care about it like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I don't know. But enough people do. And those people are, man, they're playing for keeps. They got it all,
They are.
Jesus Christ.
They are.
Yeah.
And they're in the news every day. So
yeah. It's hard to ignore it. It really is.
It is.
Yeah.
It is.
Jesus.
It is. Oh, the one thing I was kind of laughing at when you were talking about AI, one of the talents I had and still have is I am very good at figuring out what keywords to put into Google to find something quickly and accurately.
You have what they call Google Foo.
Yeah.
Yes.
And my boss is like, the one day this is 4 or 5 years ago, he's like, he was just amazed. I just did something, found it so quickly. And so we were talking about AI a couple months ago, and we were talking about how to implement it at the company here. And I said, my one talent is being taken away because that's
no. Your new talent's going to be talking to AI in a way that gets you
quicker,
gets it doing what you want it to do. You can talk to it wrong and not end up where you want to be.
That is true. So, you got to say no hallucinations, so you make sure it's actually accurate information and not just what someone typed in.
Don't make anything
Facebook.
up.
Yeah.
Don't do this. But I not even that low. Like, I don't mean ask it a question to get the answer you want. Like, I'm not trying to say like trick it into saying what you want it to say. I'm telling you, like, there's a way to, if you use it enough, you'll see there's a way that you have to talk to it to make sure that it's thinking the way you're thinking. It's almost like, how do you translate your desire to its understanding?
The way our IT guy explained it to me is have a conversation with it. Don't be doing keyword. Like, talk to it like you would talk to a person, which actually then you should be pretty good at it too. But that's what he said to me, is like, look, you want to ask it questions like you would you're across the table, having a cup of coffee, versus here's the 5 keywords I want to know. So
I agree with that. I think that's kind of a beneficial way to do it. All right. Well, I'm going to stop the recording, but I have another question for you about something, and that we won't bore people with. But I appreciate you doing this very much, and thank you very much. I think it was awesome. I appreciate you reaching out. If other people have knowledge about celiac or want to talk about it, I hope they reach out and come on. So
yeah, great talking to you. Yeah, and definitely all the people who have gluten issues, definitely call Scott.
Speak up. Yeah.
Tell your story. Yeah.
Awesome. Hold on 1 second for me. The podcast episode that you just enjoyed was sponsored by Eversense CGM. They make the Eversense 365. That thing lasts a whole year. One insertion every year? Come on. You probably feel like I'm messing with you, but I'm not. EversenseCGM.com/Juicebox. This episode of the Juicebox Podcast is sponsored by Omnipod 5. Omnipod 5 is a tube-free automated insulin delivery system that's been shown to significantly improve A1C and time in range for people with type 1 diabetes when they've switched from daily injections. Learn more and get started today at omnipod.com/juicebox. At my link, you can get a free starter kit right now. Terms and conditions apply. Eligibility may vary. Full terms and conditions can be found at omnipod.com/juicebox. This episode of the Juicebox Podcast was sponsored by US Med. usmed.com/juicebox, or call 888-721-1514. Get started today with US Med. Links in the show notes. Links at juiceboxpodcast.com. Thank you so much for listening. I'll be back very soon with another episode of the Juicebox Podcast. If you're not already subscribed or following the podcast in your favorite audio app like Spotify or Apple Podcasts, please do that now. Seriously, just to hit follow or subscribe will really help the show. If you go a little further in Apple Podcasts and set it up so that it downloads all new episodes, I'll be your best friend. And if you leave a 5-star review, I'll probably send you a Christmas card. Would you like a Christmas card? If you're looking for community around type 1 diabetes, check out the Juicebox Podcast private Facebook group, Juicebox Podcast, type 1 diabetes. But everybody is welcome. Type 1, type 2, gestational, loved ones, it doesn't matter to me. If you're impacted by diabetes and you're looking for support, comfort, or community, check out Juicebox Podcast, type 1 diabetes on Facebook. Hey, what's up, everybody? If you've noticed that the podcast sounds better and you're thinking like, how does that happen? What you're hearing is Rob at Wrong Way Recording doing his magic to these files. So if you want him to do his magic to you, wrongwayrecording.com. You got a podcast? You want somebody to edit it? You want Rob.